174 billion will be spent on electric vehicles, including a network of 500,000 EV stations. So that's a big deal. Let me see if I can open this in a... No, that won't let me do it. Okay. We'll just make it work. We have 80 billion for Amtrak repairs, improvements to existing routes, and expansion. So for those who like rail, basically the first two are huge. EV, electric vehicles, almost 200 billion, and 80 billion, almost 100 billion on trains. Then you have 115 billion on bridges, highways, roads, main streets that are in critical need of repair, 50 billion on climate change resiliency, 25 miscellaneous, 25 upgrading airports, 20 billion on road safety, 17 billion on coastal ports, ferries, 20 billion on connecting neighborhoods to historically cut off, and 85 billion for modernizing public transit. I mean, who wouldn't be supportive of this? These are all great things. If you are a country, do you want to be ready for electronic vehicles? Sorry, I keep saying electronic. Electric vehicles. Do you want a rail system that's modern? Do you want bridges, highways, and roads? Do you want to be able to hold up to climate change and climate disasters? Do you want modern airports, road safety, a more connected country, and public transit? Hell yeah. So this is one of those things where you got to wonder if Republicans can't support this. Like, what are we gonna do, man? Like, what are you gonna be opposed to? Like, these are things that are good for the economy. They create jobs, and they pay off for multiple generations. You think about like our current national highway system costs a ton of money, but look at where we would be without it. And if you're not sure, you should try traveling through Eastern Europe. Or many parts of Asia where they have crappy infrastructure. Frankly, parts of Italy, where the infra is just not there. And it's not surprising that a lot of countries struggle to compete in the global marketplace. I'm particularly excited about the electric vehicle since, GM and I think Ford have decided to go all electric in the next, 5 years or so. We're going to need that infra, and that's going to create a boom of innovation and jobs. So that's exciting. Then there is quality of life at home. So you've got retrofit 2 million homes and commercial properties, expand high-speed broadband, and I'm guessing that would include rural, 100 billion for high-speed broadband expansion, 100 billion for upgrading and building public schools, 100 billion for eliminating lead pipes and modernizing drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, 40 billion public housing, 20 billion VA hospital and clinics, plug orphan oil and gas wells and clean up abandoned mines, clean energy and sustainability accelerator, childcare facilities in high needs areas, community college infrastructure, federal buildings modernization, new workers in public lands and waters, improved electric grid. This is great, man. We're going to have like America 2.0 with this thing. I'm loving it. Okay, then there is caregivers for elderly and disabled. Whoa, 400 billion. That's a big bill there. That is to improve access to quality, affordable home or community-based care for elderly people and people with disabilities, expand Medicaid, boost pay for care workers who are disproportionately women of color and typically earn $12 an hour. Well, that's an interesting number there. In the bill, it's got $400 billion for caregivers for elderly and disabled, and then $100 billion for electric grid, and it had $200 billion for electric vehicle network, EV stations, 500,000 EV stations. And then another $100 billion for trains. So there's almost as much on the caregivers as there is on the traditional transportation infra. Then you've got research, development, and manufacturing. So you got $52 billion supporting rural manufacturing and clean energy. $48 billion for workforce development infrastructure. Okay, now this is where if you're in the Yang Gang, you get a little bit concerned because you're like, man, just give people cash. You know, we don't need a bunch of job training programs. Let people decide and maybe purchase that from the market. Infra and laboratories, climate crisis, domestic industrial capacity. That's interesting. $50 billion. If I'm in a negotiation, I might be, and I'm sort of channeling my former fiscal conservative side. I'm like, oh, I don't know. This one feels like a little bit of extra government for me, but whatever. $50 billion for a new office to monitor industrial capacity. $46 billion for clean energy manufacturing. $30 billion for R&D for small businesses. I would just give people cash again. $20 billion innovation hub. I'd give people cash. Okay, I'm all for $30 billion to prevent future pandemics. I mean, that's something like we all know that we're feeling better about COVID as more people get vaccinated. I think a lot of us believe that this is sort of like going to be the new normal. So $10 billion for R&D at HBCUs. Dislocated workers program, I would just give cash. New National Science Foundation. Okay, maybe. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to be honest with you guys. For this $300 billion in research, development, and manufacturing, I would probably say, you know what? You could give everyone $1,000. Probably every adult $1,500, and you might spur more workforce development and economic growth than a lot of this stuff. But you know, we can debate that. That is $300 billion. So that is about 15% of the Biden plan. Is this R&D and manufacturing? So you got 300 for R&D and manufacturing. You've got 400 for care. That's 700. And then you've got 650 for a lot of, I would call it home infrastructure, like electric grid, clean energy, public housing. And then you've got 600 for transportation. So if I were a Republican, I would be like, yeah, no brainer, 100% behind the 600 for transportation, 100% behind the 650 for home infrastructure. So that get us to 1.2 trillion. I would like to explore this 400 billion for the elderly and consider a basic income for elderly people. That might be better, in my opinion. And then for this R&D and manufacturing, that's the one where I'm like, that's a lot of offices and programs and stuff. So I might just take the 300 billion from this R&D and 400 billion from elderly, and take that 700 billion and turn it into basic income subsidies for people to spend as they want, and then the other 1.2 trillion in home infra, and transportation, I would go big on those. So that is a little bit of a quick overview of the bill. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Call me Phil. St. Louis in the house. Welcome, sir. Seton wants to know, why are Republicans against this? Yeah, I think there's 3 reasons, if I had to guess, but I'd be curious what you guys think in the chat. The first reason is they just don't like Biden, and they don't want to. If they spent all last year trying to convince everybody that if you elect Joe Biden, 3 things will happen, right? This is what the Republicans promised. They said, number 1, the stock market would crash the day after Biden wins the election. I think the quote from Donald J. Trump was, say goodbye to your 401ks, to your entire retirement savings. The markets will crash. Investors will pull their money out because they're afraid of the radical socialist Biden-Harris takeover of the economy. Meanwhile, the stock market has been setting new records and been doing quite well. And we're not hearing that because Biden doesn't brag every time the market sets a new record, because generally in a growing market, it's always setting a new record. I think a lot of Trump supporters forgot about that. It's sort of like every new iPhone is the fastest iPhone ever. It's not that big of a deal to set a new record. That's what markets are supposed to do over time. At any rate, so they don't like it because they were trying to convince all their followers that Biden would be terrible, and he's a communist. The second thing is they might have legitimate concerns about so much spending. I mean, this infra bill, I think, is around the same size as Trump's tax cuts. So let's see, how much did Trump tax cuts cost? So it looks like Trump's tax cuts were about $2 trillion. And it's basically the same, it's almost the same cost as this Biden infra bill. And so it's an interesting question. Like, if you supported cutting taxes on the rich and corporations that were making, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars, and that was okay, and that reduced government revenue, and any sane economist would say, like, no, it's not going to pay for itself. You're going to get more growth, but you're not going to get an extra $2 trillion in tax revenues of growth. So if Trump supporters were so fine with him slashing taxes, then why are they opposed to spending the same amount of money on programs like roads, bridges, electric grid, high-speed internet for rural areas? Like, why wouldn't you support that? Modernizing schools? Because you could argue, like, those for sure will pay you back. And then, the MAGA people will always say, oh, I'm all for freedom. I want companies to do whatever they want. We should just, like, unleash the innovation of the American job creators. Well, then why don't you just cut taxes down to 1%? Like, at some point, the math doesn't line up, right? You have to collect some taxes. And so, at any rate, so I think the Republicans are against this primarily because they don't want to admit that Biden's being reasonable. And 2 is maybe it kind of begs the question, like, why didn't Trump do this? Because Trump said when he was running the first time that nobody knows infrastructure and building roads, bridges, and railways better than Donald J. Trump. I mean, he also said nobody respects women more than Donald J. Trump, and he's the least racist person you'll ever see. But he did say nobody knows infrastructure, and he and I think his son-in-law, Jared, they were talking about big infrastructure kind of historic things. So I think it the Republicans are against this because it kind of undermines what they were saying about why Biden was so terrible. It highlights that Trump didn't do anything for the most part for infra. And then the third is there might be some legitimate budget concerns. So, at any rate, that's my theory. Looks like Elizabeth agrees and definitely remembers Trump saying those crazy things. Wait a minute. Elizabeth Norris from New York Post YouTube post fame. Elizabeth Norris, were you in the New York Post? If you were, congratulations. But let's take a look. Speaking of Trump, you guys want we could take a look at what Trump actually did, because maybe we're being hard on the guy, and maybe he did more than we're giving him credit for. So luckily, let's see if this will work. We have the ability to look and see what the man did. Okay. This is from Bloomberg. Not exactly a, communist left-wing publication. And this one is about how Trump's $1 trillion in infra pledge added up. Oh, so Trump had promised to spend $1 trillion on infra. A mixed record, it says. Trump campaign on $1 trillion infra plan. We are going to fix our inner cities, rebuild our highways, bridges, tunnels, airports, schools, and hospitals. And we will put millions of people to work as we rebuild it. He referred to himself as the builder president. He held multiple infrastructure weeks calling for investments. Let's see. The subject. Okay, so according to this guy Adler, the subject just never seemed to be a priority it indicated it would be. The $1 trillion package boiled down to a series of White House budget sketches proposing to use $200 billion as an incentive for private investors to put up the other $800 billion. We believe this will be a great return. They had a press release. The Trump campaign had a press release on a referendum in Nashville of $5 billion, which is less than $1 trillion. Brookings Institution says, we will look back on these 4 years as a missed opportunity. The Trump administration has been a major letdown for nearly all state and local officials and advocates. Yeah. One prominent deflated dream was the Gateway Project, the $30 billion plan to repair Amtrak under the Hudson River. It ranks high on the list of national infra needs. And Trump administration was supportive of it, but they stopped coming to project meetings. Okay, so if you stop going to meetings, it's hard to be supportive of things. Probably, I would have to imagine, because New York had a Democratic governor and senators, and I'm guessing, if I had to bet, that little Donald was mad about that. The administration punished cities that were trying to advance investments the White House described. It delayed the release of $1.4 billion in capital investment grants for urban transport. It delayed in 2019, causing sponsors to withdraw their request for funding or cancel plans, according to the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. If you're a smaller community that wants to get something done, but then a year passes, your costs exceed your resources. We just stopped applying because we knew that urban areas weren't being favored. So under Trump, looks like more spending was going to rural. They increased the share of funding to rural significantly over urban. Okay. Now, you could argue they were just trying to catch up, but who knows why Trump wanted to reduce spending to urban areas. Let's see. So here you have a 5.8 million multi-purpose transport center in Wisconsin, a main bridge in Kennebec County. Yeah, these are like a few million here, a few million there. Oh, of course, there was the border wall. So rather than building, the Trump administration proved adept at demolishing, scrapping environmental protections, rolling back fuel efficiency standards, and withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accords. But the construction project for which the president is most likely remembered is the U.S.-Mexico border wall. 360 miles of barrier to replace existing fencing. And it has cost U.S. taxpayers 5 times more per mile than in previous administrations. And it falls short of Trump's campaign promises, including that Mexico would pay for this wall. Yeah, so basically, Trump really kind of sucked when it came to getting anything done on infrastructure. Yeah. That's the TLDR if I had to give one. So, what are you going to do, man? I mean, I'm guessing if you were talking to a Trump supporter, they would just say, well, what would they say? How would they defend Trump's infrastructure? I think they would say, well, the wall. He did the 360 miles of barrier. But, I don't know if that barrier wall is $1 trillion in infra investments that he planned, because that would be a very expensive wall. And he would talk about how our airports needed up modernizing. I mean, I'll just ask you guys, in the last 4 years, did you see airports, roads, bridges being modernized? Electrification, high-speed broadband. I don't think that happened. And that's exactly what Biden is proposing. So hopefully the House and the Senate give him that support. Mike CK, another member, is saying, hey, it's always a party line. If you show some plans from Biden to Republicans without revealing whose plans they are, and some will agree with Biden's and turn around and go against it once they find out it's from Biden. Yeah, this is the equivalent of many Republicans were in favor of healthcare exchanges where health insurance plans had to compete against each other, and requirements for individuals to take responsibility and all have some basic level of insurance. And they were all in support of children remaining on their parents' healthcare plans, and for health insurers not to be able to kick you off or reject you due to pre-existing conditions. That all sounds good to Republicans until you tell them that, oh, well, Obama supports that too. And then suddenly it's some terrible thing. So, in summary, the Biden plan, $2 trillion, about 1.5 is for transportation and home modernization, and then another half is for job training and care for elderly. I would imagine we're all going to agree that transportation and home modernization, non-negotiable. Even Republicans should support that, and maybe they negotiate around the job training stuff and the elderly care. Maybe the compromise is, rather than creating all these programs, you spend that on a basic income pilot, because that $500 billion you could get to, like, $200 a month for every adult citizen. for a year. Or you could probably do like $400 or $500 a month for every elderly adult, on top of what they get from Social Security. But obviously, I'm a big basic income fan. Now, if you found this unboxing of the infrastructure plan useful and educational, and you think people would value it to kind of get into the actual numbers and look at the details of the plan versus just saying that they're opposed to it or for it, please remember to like and share, because these nerds live streams, they're not that popular. This is not like watching, cars crash on YouTube or cute pets or gaming videos. Like this is a little bit of a niche type of content. So we need all the likes and shares we can get. Any rate, Think Harder is saying no, don't give Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene any more airtime. I mean, I'm not trying to promote them for sure, but I think it is important to understand the intellectual. Oh, Brett Isaac donated through Super Chat. Brett, let me get my little bell. Thank you, Brett Isaac. I appreciate it. As a reminder, all of this money goes to paying for this fancy streaming software, which is pretty clear, if I may say so myself. And then our podcast hosting fees. By the way, if you listen to audio podcasts, I put a lot of our Nerds live streams audio on that. And also helps us kind of promote and invest more in new tools and more content. Can I join the live stream? No, you cannot, Ryan. My son just asked to join the live stream, but he is not allowed because we're breaking down data here. And he just wants to get access to that Super Chat money, because sometimes when he comes on, I tell him, hey, if you help me run the live stream, I'll give you a percentage of the Super Chat to try and encourage entrepreneurial behavior. But let's first, we will get into some of the MAGA Twitter people, because I think it's important to understand where they're coming from and try and understand the other kind of half of the country. But before we do that, let me just, oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Yeah, so Mike CK is like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. That's why I follow these people, and it's important to know where they're coming from. So we're going to go into that. Before we do that, let me just give a quick thank you to the people who make this content possible. Obviously, in addition to Brett Isaac, who just gave us a super chat, we have our ongoing Nerds for Humanity members. So I just want to give a shout out to them. We have to give a shout out to, we'll start with our VPs. And by the way, we have SVP and EVP levels available. And if you do join at that highest level, every time I do a live stream, if you have like a one-sentence message you want me to read out to the entire audience, I'm happy to do that, as long as obviously it's appropriate and won't get me in trouble. But at the VP level, currently the highest level, we have VLAM, JM Sap, Fat Lamb, Kristen Slevin, Laura Lane, Patrick Dunn, Mindful Skeptics, Soldier One, and Bike. And Soldier One and Bike had started out as lower level members, and then recently upgraded to the VP level. So we thank you for that. And if you're thinking about becoming a member, just click that join button. Then the next level is the hardcore. And we have Mike Chang, Gene Lim, David, Tracy Mesa, DK, Phoenix Congress, Jekkalego, who I think is in this chat or was earlier, Kirsch, Thiva, Mr. History Fan, Byram Hess, Mona, Susan, Yang Den, Robert, Dean L, Stat Nerd, Galessa, Jay Parent, Tony Perella, Jay Bryan, Annalisa, Vivian, and Dana. Okay? And then at the entry level, the verified nerd level. Oh yeah, Mike CK, VP is more money. Basically, the more money you give, the earlier you get the shout out. And then if you're SVP, that's a new perk, which is I'll just read out a message from you to the audience. Mike CK saying, I'm staying lower level until I get my UBI. I don't blame you. If you just, whatever you can do, it's much appreciated, and it allows us to just produce more content. So verified nerds, we have Helen, Lisa, Sugar, Albert, Brandon, Yes, Brian, Peter, Arez, Your Mammon, Sophia, Jedwiga, Gail, Shake, Mike, Doris, Emerald, Nell, Lori, Ben, Roger, Lisa, Christina, Vaughn, Rasta, Richard, Jessica, James, Jalopy, Emma, Spirited, Hui, Steven, Ira, Shoni, Philip, Jameson, Doctor, William, Karen, Monica, Alex, Ardent, Mai, Semery, Brittany, Clyde, Want to See More, Sasha, and I think Sasha might be our newest member overall. So let me just give a quick shout out to our latest members, and then we're going to react to the MAGA people. Hold on. Apply, and then we'll say total time as member. Reverse order. Oh, Flavio has become a member. Flavio Lira. Welcome, Flavio. All right. Thank you, Flavio. Hardcore. So Flavio Lira is our newest member. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sasha Alexander joined 6 days ago. Vivian, 27 days ago. Dana, 27 days ago. And Want to See More, 27 days ago. All less than a month old. Flavia is about 10 seconds old. So welcome.
Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang 2020. Yang Gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang Gang 2020.